This is the 7th episode and we don't have a theme song, so I'm singing this silly tune. Oh yeah! Hello again, dear listener. You have tuned in to the Minsk and Friends Speakeasy, the premiere show for random miscellanea on video games. I'm your host, Minsk.
Hi, it's Joonatan. I didn't see you there.
Oh, well, hello. Pull up a chair, why don't you, and let's get in on the topic. Oh, yes, we're suave today.
Yeah, that was my Troy McClure attempt.
Troy McClure. Yeah, I feel it. Pretty good.
You may have seen me from such podcasts as What's He Talking About Now? And Oh God, Help Me Lord.
No, that's a little dark. Fair enough. So, thanks again to everybody who tuned in last time as we went on and on about Death Stranding. We're sticking to the post-apocalypse today as well on the game we're talking about. But before that, let's ruminate really quickly on some of more news in the gaming world. We've been talking about both of the upcoming next big consoles, the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X. Hold on. Yeah, there's a Series S and a Series X. That's confusing.
Yeah, and they're not exactly well named because we had this generation we had the Xbox One S and then we had the Xbox One X. And now they released the Xbox Series S and the Series X. And apparently they did not do a good job of differentiating them because Amazon reported that the sales of the series or the Xbox One X went up 750% in the last couple of days because people thought that was the one that they were pre-ordering.
Oh, that's...
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, that's really bad, actually. Oh dear. Oh, not to mention it also, you're kind of tempted to make the acronym XSX for the Series X, which is also kind of looks a little bad, but there you go. Well, anyway, the big deal, of course, is that the prices are out now, finally. They were playing a bit of a game of chicken, Sony and Microsoft, for a long while, who was going to be the first to give out the prices. It's... The Microsoft came out first. I believe it's $399 for the regular Series X, and hold on, am I right?
$499 for the big one.
Right, yeah. $499 for the regular one, and $299, I believe, for the smaller unit.
Series S, and the Series S is essentially, at least in my books, the best deal in console gaming. Like, I don't even know since maybe the Super Nintendo, because at $299 plus with the Game Pass that they're offering, if you're not into the whole that you don't want to go and buy games, you don't want to do the research on what games you want to get, you just want to have like a Netflix for games. That's it. That's all you need. You get a really solid gaming console that is supported by every first-party studio and almost every third-party studio out there, and you get all the games for it for like $6 a month that you can play as long as you subscribe.
And it's like $10 a month, I think, is the asking price.
Just for the console version, I think it's like $6 or $7. I think in Europe it's €9 because we pay the Europe tax. But
yeah,
in terms of even at €10 or so a month, it's a crazy deal.
Yes, I mean, if you put in an hour a day, if you want to use the very basic how much money versus how many hours spent, an hour a day will be 30 hours for a month, and that's only 10 euros, let's say. That's pretty good. I'm really impressed how well Microsoft has kind of turned things around after we were kind of rolling eyes at their game presentation earlier. Like, good on you, Microsoft.
Yeah, it's really, really surprising and really great.
Yeah, and honestly, this is one of those situations where the consumer benefits from the arms race going on here. Like, Sony and Microsoft are doing a pretty good job of enticing us. Because then Sony busted out their prices. They're also having a 2-console system. We knew that there was going to be a digital-only version of the PS5, and that is significantly cheaper than the regular PS5 as well. Was that also $499, the regular PS5, or were they actually?
Yeah, the $499, or like I think it was $499 with that.
Yeah, and I think it's $399 for the digital one. So yeah, that's also okay. I don't know why they were being so coy for so long about it when they ended up being basically the same prices for their machines in the end. But there you go. Now, there's been some problems with the pre-ordering, I've heard. You already mentioned the snafu on Amazon.
Yeah, and I've been one of those people who's been saying that they probably shouldn't have released the consoles this year.
Right.
We are in the middle of a pandemic. All the factories are closed. And it just feels like that, especially since they delayed Halo for the Xbox. And the PlayStation just announced that most of the games that they're trying to release as their big launch titles are also going to be released for the PS4. So there's nothing right now coming out for the next generation consoles that is, there's nothing exclusive that will tell people that, hey, you need to get this.
No killer app for it.
No killer app, nothing that will sell the console. And now, I think today they announced that, Finland, for example, we're only getting what amounts to a handful of PlayStation consoles. Most people will not be able to get their PlayStations until next year.
So there's going to be a few elite here in the country then by the holidays, apparently. Very odd.
Yeah, it's not a great scenario, and apparently Verkkokauppa announced today as well that Xboxes will not be arriving for the release date either.
Oh dear, that's really embarrassing. I can only assume that there's some fiscal year reason. Gotta have the sales by the certain date, which is why they were still sticking to these dates, and also the whole holiday season thing. But it's not looking great for either of those companies, honestly, this holiday season.
No, I think they would have had a better time just taking the hit now and releasing it next summer or next fall, when hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood, this whole pandemic thing would be over.
Yeah, that, I guess. But, who knows what they were thinking, honestly, that they keep sticking on this. It might also just be just like the whole who's the first to show the price. Maybe it's just it matters so much that who gets ahead of the other one of these two. I don't know. I don't personally feel like a race is necessary, but I think that there is a bit of a mentality like that behind there with the consoles.
Yeah, and I'm being, of course, hypocritical with this because I'm getting both consoles on release day.
Oh wow! Well, you're one of the Finnish elite then.
Well, I'm in a extremely lucky position that I am, I have arranged them through work because of review stuff and everything.
Right, exactly. You have their need to have it.
Yeah, my complaints about that this should be released next year are kind of useless in that regard, because I will still be doing stuff with them, I'll be reviewing them and all that, but I understand why people who are excited want them right away. It's always fun. It's the whole...
Of course.
Yeah, it's a big communal event, and I do miss the kind of spirited energy that one would have with going to E3 or going to a games festival and being like, yay, my console, the one I like, but I don't have that anymore.
Yeah. I guess this is now a time for all of us to practice being less of an extreme consumer, be more of a patient one then, get some practice in that, I suppose.
Right, and of course everybody knows that the big console release that we're all waiting for is going to be next year anyway, when the Switch 2 comes out.
Right, the wanted version of that, indeed. I guess Nintendo is the one who's going to make some kind of winning this holiday season, owing to the mere fact that they don't have to get a console out of the gate right now. They can just focus on their software production.
Right, and because they have plenty of Switches in stock, they are still being produced at a pretty high rate, and they are still selling at it at a very decent rate. And they just came out with a bunch of new games for it. They announced a bunch of new titles coming in for the Christmas season, so they're just printing money at this rate.
Yeah, Nintendo is super content just doing its own thing, as kind of is habit for them.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, can you give us short impressions of that Mario thing? I do believe you had your hands on. You mentioned that you had the 3D collection.
Yeah, I've been playing that now for 2 days, and they've done nothing with it.
Really?
Yeah, they are basically just emulated versions of the original ones. There's like nothing that's been put into them. No like upgrades or quality of life improvements or anything. It's essentially just the bare minimum that they could have done for these games.
Is Super Mario 64, is it the original 64 version or is it the DS version, do you know?
I think it's the original one because I've seen people point out that it's got the spelling mistakes from the original one still in it.
Yeah, and I mean, the DS version was like incredibly updated with a cast of more characters, and like the powers are split up between them. Like that actually was kind of a big deal, that update. So
I think this is then the 64 version because I haven't seen at least anything yet, but I've mostly been spending my time with the Mario game that I've played least, which is the Mario Sunshine.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that's kind of the idea here, is for people who never got to play some of these games to get their hands on them. So I guess not that big of a deal if there aren't any fancy improvements, but
Like I kind of get why Nintendo would do that because people will buy them nonetheless. But I do wish that since they're asking for a full price of a title for this, it's still €60. I wish they would have at least done more or at least included something else into it because and especially since they have the ridiculous that this is a timed exclusive, they're not going to sell it again. In, 3 or 4 months.
Oh yeah, that's the most embarrassing part about it, honestly.
It's really silly.
I don't understand. I guess the only thing I can think of is that they're planning on selling the games separately later, the ones that are in the collection.
That's most likely it, yeah. They're probably going to split them up and they're going to be like $20 or $30 per game on the Nintendo store because they can, completely dominate their own marketplace.
But even so, that's really kind of a lame move, honestly, to give this opportunity now and then take it away like that. I don't feel great about it.
No, Nintendo does its own thing, and they have always been a company that comes very late to change their habits. They're not great at moving their ship.
Truth be told, I don't remember this kind of habit from anyone else.
Oh, well, not from anybody else, no. Nintendo did this stuff, like, they started this with the Nintendo 64 by doing those timed releases with the Zelda games. I remember, like, they would release the Master Sword collection that had, like, added content in it, and it's like, if you didn't buy it at a limited time, you would not be able to play that added content ever. Because they could do what they wanted with it. Right, I do kind of remember that. Yeah, so I guess that is some precedent. You're right. Yeah, it's always silly. It's never consumer friendly, and it is kind of the kind of stuff that they can only do because they are essentially the Disney of the gaming world. Yeah, they totally have their own share of the market that is kind of very hard to like break into by anyone else. Like they have their certain their certain customer group is very, very set in stone in that sense. Absolutely. But then we had one more exciting thing that came out today. I think this is something that you will be more into. Oh yes, indeed. It is. Why don't you give us it? It's because I was like, what, really? It is happening? Okay, so just like about 8 hours ago, we got a news article coming out that the Taiwanese ratings board had officially rated the Metal Gear Solid collection for the PC. Now, this is something that already came out some time ago for the PlayStation, and I think it's come out for the GameCube at one point, but we're finally getting them now. We're going to get the original Metal Gear Solid 2, and then hopefully even Metal Gear Solid 3 for the PC.
Yeah, that's super exciting, and I'm super happy that those games are really hard to come by, especially the Metal Gear Solid 1 is very hard to come by in this day and age, so I'm so thrilled that those are getting PC ports now.
Yeah, and I mean, Metal Gear Solid 1, as we've talked about in our Death Stranding episode, that's my favorite Kojima game. Because that's the one where I feel that his vision and the limitations forced him to concentrate on what was, the best for that game. And it's been a couple of years since I played it last. I think I played the GameCube remaster, and I remember it was still, even after like 10 years, a really fantastic game. So I'm excited to go back and play them, and maybe even give the second one another try.
I would recommend it. It's fascinating in this day and age of social media and kind of information flow to replay that game, because it brings up those themes in a lot of ways. In a 2001 game, like, Facebook was just a twinkle in Mark Zuckerberg's eye at that point, and they kind of nailed, in some sense, the kind of community and the way we treat information in today's age already in that game. It's mystifying for that alone, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And the third one is something that I have a special place in my heart for as well, even though that one started to get a little out of hand in terms of what Kojima tried to put into it. But I remember that it had so much stuff that I liked just discovering, like the fights with the End, the old sniper guy.
Yes.
Just all the little tricks and things that you could do with it were really, really great. And I do remember thinking that is a game worth playing if you haven't, because they are a lot of fun.
Oh yes, that's probably my favorite of the lot is number 3. So yeah, hopefully that one also gets a PC port at some point. Fans of my channel can expect a Let's Play of one of these games at some point. I think it's a given once those are available. Yeah,
and I think once they're out, we're probably going to have to talk about them in more depth, because I think I will also dive into them again.
Clearly, this is now the second podcast in a row where we've just been yammering on about Metal Gear, so clearly both of us could go on and on about this topic. But I think it's time we move on to the actual topic today. So enough about the news for now. Let's talk about Wasteland 3, the latest in 30-year-old series, actually. The first Wasteland came out in 1988, the classic post-apocalyptic RPG, which was the originator of Fallout, really, and finally gets another installment, very much sticking close to its roots. I believe you told me you had not played the previous Wastelands. Was that correct?
I had not played any of the Wastelands before this, no.
But I do believe you have played, I'm sure you've played the first-person shooter Fallouts by Bethesda. Have you played the isometric Fallouts from Black Isle?
Yeah, I've played all the Fallouts, the original Fallouts, and I actually have to take my back. I have played Wasteland 2, because I'm now looking at the cover here. I just did not recognize it because I believe I played it when it came out, and that was quite a while ago.
It was 2014, I think. So that was also like 25 years between Wasteland 1 and 2. It was very much a retro revival in that sense.
Yes, so Wasteland 2 I've played a little bit of, and I've played the hell out of the original 2 Fallouts. I've played way less of the Bethesda Fallouts, but I did love Fallout New Vegas.
That's the one by Obsidian, which was the company made by former Black Isle guys, kind of like Inxile, who made this game. They're also former Black Isle dudes, and that's why New Vegas resonates with a lot of people, precisely because it's got that old school Fallout touch in it, versus Bethesda's take, which, of course, full disclosure, I do love Bethesda's take on them, but they did basically be like, let's make Elder Scrolls, but with guns, was their main motivation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm actually kind of the same. I did play Wasteland 2 a little bit back in the day because I did get on the hype train for like this classic series and a return to isometric Fallout. It left a bit of a bad first impression on me, so I did not get actually deep into it. I was a little bit disappointed in it. But the original Fallouts, yes, also absolutely. Just like the Bethesda ones, I also, as a kid, I played so much of the original Fallouts. That's why I was very, very invested in this Wasteland series. And I guess the first one, I should say, that's a little bit too old for me. It's way before my time, so I've never had the inkling to try that one out. It's one of those truly old-school RPGs, which are really challenging and very esoteric, so I have not felt the need to touch that one.
Yeah, I get you.
But please go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say the same thing, that I think for me the esoteric nature and the kind of clumsiness of it is something that did charm me, and kind of kept me into them, or kept me playing, at least with the original Fallouts.
Right, yeah. Well, they definitely, they were the perfect like level of complexity for me, I think. I should say I love also turn-based tactical games. Maybe Fallout started that love. I love the gameplay system of that. The original Wasteland, actually, I think it plays like those kind of Eye of the Beholder style and Might and Magic style, like first-person RPGs where there's like text parsers. Kind of not my jam. But the Fallout series has a really, really good flow with the RPG and the game mechanics side. And I'm going to come out and say it right now. I think Wasteland 3, it met my expectations. It, I think, is the closest we have to a classic isometric Fallout experience at the moment. I don't know how you feel.
I would agree with you. I think that it is the closest thing we have to a Fallout today. It's not a perfect representation. It does show that the people who made Wasteland have different things they like to emphasize compared to Fallout. But yeah, I would agree with you that as far as like if you like Fallout 1 and 2, this is about the best thing you can get today.
Yeah. So let's get into it. The game's premise, it is a post-apocalyptic America, but not the completely bonkers, confusing one we talked about last time on Death Stranding. This is your standard Cold War got hot and the nukes fell and that destroyed society, post-apocalyptic America. And it's interesting, all of the Wastelands are actual sequels to each other. I almost think they would have maybe rebooted it with Wasteland 2, but they did not. There actually is very much continuity here, and they do reference events in previous games, but it's not too bad for someone who hasn't played them to jump in, right?
Yeah, no, I would agree. There's I think the thing, like if we're comparing Fallouts or comparing anything with this in terms of the setup, I think that this one is more as Wasteland types. It's more Borderlands Wasteland than Mad Max Wasteland, which is what Fallout tried to emulate.
I guess so, yeah. At least very much the very first Fallout. They started getting, already in Fallout 2, a little bit sillier. I think the screwball nature is what you're referring to. Yeah, this one has that in it. It is a bit of a wacky ride, isn't it?
It is, and I don't know how far have you gotten in it right now.
Oh yeah, good. We should bring this up. So you've beaten the game entirely, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Well, I unfortunately am not, I can't give a full expansive review. I'm about 12, 14, 15 hours in, which means I'm around level 10 in my character's levels, and I've done my fair share of questing, but definitely, like, I haven't, the goal is to find, the goal of finding the three children, that's like the main quest. I've yet to get to a single one of them. I'm getting close to starting on my first one.
Right. Have you met the cult that worships Ronald Reagan yet?
No, but I've heard reference to it, and I can imagine how that's going to go. That's probably going to be a very, a very eye-rolling series of encounters.
Well, I mean, that they were probably my favorite part of the game because they were the kind of bizarre silliness that like I would have expected to find in Fallout, but it's on the level of being like it's very much on the nose,
right?
But it's also it's satiric enough that it just goes into the realm of being so on the nose that it's even funnier because of how on the nose it is. I don't want to give anything away, but once you see them, you'll understand like that this kind of humor comes from the point of like how far can we take the joke into the realm of being so obvious that obviousness becomes increasingly funny.
I can totally imagine. I mean, there's enough jokes about the cult of Reagan, quote unquote, in this day and age. So like adding that post-apocalyptic out of controlness, I can very much imagine it'll go lots of places. But I think to some extent the black humor in this game is very much a good part of it. We talked about it back in our Doom Eternal review, how that game needed to be kind of cartoonish at a lot of times, just so it wouldn't be so horribly bleak. I think the same counts here. The post-apocalypse as a concept is terrifying when you get down to it. So that level of sardonicness that pervades it in a weird way makes it more digestible, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think there's a little too much of the humor, in the sense that like depending on like when you're doing like skills and stuff, like the looter narrative stuff, is it takes away a little bit of the tragedy that needs to be there also to make the apocalypse relatable.
Right.
But when everything is a joke, it does help, mitigate the horribleness, but it also makes it a lot harder to then feel that, your choices mean anything because everything feels like a joke.
Right. I can see that, yeah.
Yeah, but I do like it that there are multiple scenarios where they don't make it into a joke, like a lot of the quests you do and the results that they end up with. It's nice to see that usually a lot of post-apocalypse stories try and do this thing where it's like tragedy or like the sense of loss is only allowed for people who are truly and purely good. And in this game, almost nobody is. Everybody is of some level doing horrible things to survive. And the game still allows them to have moments of pathos that was really nice to see.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of outside of your own guys, the main character of this story is fascinating. The Patriarch, which I guess short explanation. We explained the premise, but the story is your party are these members of a peacekeeping force from Arizona called the Rangers. And apparently shit went down in Wasteland 2 that I completely missed out on, and they're not doing hot, the Rangers. So they've accepted an invitation to Colorado from the Patriarch of Colorado to basically help him out with his troubles, and you can form an alliance. And the Patriarch is a very, very complex character, I think. Of course, I've only seen part of the story, but he is. They don't really play him for jokes, not much, except for the fact that he has this overly macho cult of personality around him to some extent, but he is himself a very kind of heavy character, this burdened by power figure trying to make civilization function in his own kind of part of the world. That's the take I got of this character, who's very central to the plot.
Yeah, he continues to kind of fascinate me, even though his part I wish would have been even larger. Like he is a big part of the game, naturally, but I would have wanted him to have even more because he raises a lot of questions and they have a lot of insinuations of the more far-reaching implications of what he has done and what will be done towards the end of the game.
Yeah.
And he is a great character, and I do wish that that this game makes enough money that we get another Wasteland, just so we can have more of the, well, no pun intended, more of the fallout of everything that he has done.
Yeah, I agree. It's he's like very much he's a protagonist kind of, but he is a very, very morally mixed character, and also but he also has this whole humanizing side that I feel intense loneliness from this character, especially given that your main quest is to find and wrangle his 3 estranged children. Like, that's a very interesting... I mean, I think it's kind of cool now that I think about it. There's so many plots in these RPGs, which is find the family member. But in this one, the relationship between the family members is pretty grim, honestly.
Oh yeah, and the whole finding them, it is more like that you're not going out to, tell them that, hey, do you want to come back? Please come back. It's implied and sometimes flat out said that, you bring him back no matter what.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely the thing here. Like, he spells it out. All of them basically, all the children fucked off because they couldn't, or they were directly in odds with their father, and he's now being the stern parent, basically, which, again, that's, not super cool from him. That's not great parenting, but it makes for a very interesting plot to deal with.
Yeah, and there's the whole feeling of, from Mad Max Fury Road, where it's an inverted version of, instead of you escaping with the brides, it's that you're part of the war party going after them.
Right, very true.
It's a nice turn of events.
Yeah, so I think that's a great premise for a story, and it leads to really, really interesting. I'm pretty happy with the game's setting. I mentioned that I had a bad first impression with Wasteland 2. What I mean by that is it did not feel too role-playing-y at first. You did not have a town to dick around in. You straight jumped into a mission, and the mission... And it's that classic RPG thing of, oh, you need to pick from one of 2 choices, and the other one's going to get screwed who you don't pick. And that's the immediate opening of Wasteland 2. I felt that was a little too forward. This one's great because you start out, after the opening action scene, you actually have a city to explore, and you have a base to build, and you got plenty of side quests to do. That's what I mean by this feeling like Fallout back in the day. That felt so good to dick around in the city of Colorado Springs and get to know how the city functions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the side quests are really good too. There's plenty of side quests, and some of them are fairly silly. Some of it is that, wow, the post-apocalypse is a strange world type of silliness, like a quest to find ramen noodles because it's considered a wondrous food item. But overall, I think the side quests, I'm happy with how many there are. It doesn't feel pure action-oriented, go from one main quest to another. There's a lot of leeway in moving around in this world.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the side quests regarding, the food items and stuff like that, because that's been always my favorite part of world building and the kind of the silliness where it's a dedication to the joke. I love, for example, Waterworld a lot, and it's one of those silly movies where they're he shows up to town and he's trading boots and shoelaces and stuff like that, and everyone's just it's from the ancient world.
Exactly, yeah.
And then in here and in Fallout they had the same thing with trading with bottle caps and all that, and then here you're doing the ramen quests, and I love that silliness. That's one of my favorite tropes of any kind of a post-apocalyptic thing, that the stuff that we take for granted becomes this treasured artifact in the future. So I was thrilled that those were brought back, and they were brought back in such an extensive way for the side quests.
Yeah, it's really fun how many different angles they take and how many different they do a good job of coming up with what kind of scenarios might the average people who live, well, I guess in this world there isn't much of an average person, but what kind of scenarios the people living in this world might encounter. It's overall that it's super thrilling to me. And it's also thrilling, they do a really good job of integrating your skills that you pick. This has, well, like the classic Fallout, there's a lot of like opportunity to use different skills in the world to advance and as solutions in interactions with the people. And that like really is, to me, that like feels like, yes, I'm so happy I put points in that skill because I managed to forward the situation here with that ability.
Yeah, I wasn't hugely a fan of the skills on my first run because I felt that in the beginning they didn't explain them well enough, like their longer reaching implications, what those skills could do, and they're very vague in terms of their names. Like you have the ass kissing or the ass kisser or the hard ass skills and the toaster repair stuff. It's you kind of get a vague idea even with the press copy that I played initially had a lot of stuff that they didn't update it as well in terms of what was included in the explanations. But I felt that like based off of the opening tutorial and your character creation, it was a little bit too vague for me to fully get a grip on them. But I was really happy to see that by the time the game actually got into a full swing, that a lot of those skills didn't really matter as much as you would expect, because the story itself is so well written that your choices tend to have implications and tend to have consequences based off of just how you roleplay, which for a role-playing game is super good that they actually are focusing on that.
Yes, there is that side to it, definitely. The one I really was impressed was when the beginning of the game, you are given that base by the Patriarch to set up shop in, and you find some squatters already in that place, because it's like an abandoned military base. You find some squatters and you have to decide what to do with them. I, being the bleeding heart I am, I was like, well, you guys can camp here. And that actually led to an altercation later where once our ranger base was starting to grow, there was some friction between those squatters and the and my staff, and that just led to more scratching of heads like, oh gosh, what should I do? Do I kick these guys out or do I let them stay? So that was kind of cool that came up in that fashion. And I believe there's a lot of that here. There is a lot of feedback from your choices throughout the game, right?
Oh yeah, and the way that the story is written and the way that they have the branching alternative storylines, that's something that I found that there were events coming back to bite me in the ass like 10, 20 hours later that I could not have foreseen, and it prevented doing the kind of metagaming where you just kind of, load up an older save to go and make a change for that, because it's happened so long ago.
Right. That is really hard to do in a game, so it's, again, very impressive to me that they managed to implement something like that.
It is. I doff my cap at them for that, because I miss that about games. Like, that's one of the things I don't like about the Bethesda Fallout games, is that they are very streamlined, because they have to be. They are for a different audience, they are in a different style of gameplay, but you don't get the far-reaching consequences out of anything. And in this, you get a bunch of them, and they are, for the most part, there are some that are very basic, like, you don't get this armor now, for example, but all the other stuff is much more like, you cause the death of, these people, so they will harbor a grudge for you, that then later on, when you need them for a political thing, they'll vote against you, or they will incite a riot against you, and things like that are in the way of like reading a good book or watching a TV show. It's so rewarding to come back, days and hours and weeks and months later to have something like that be called back upon, because it feels like you're in a living, breathing world in that sense.
Yeah. So that's super exciting to me. I guess one quick thing about the small side about the side quests. This game, or just quest in general, this game is the type where they give you the recommended level of the quest. How do you feel about that in video games?
I can take it or leave it. I don't really mind. I've noticed now that because I play a lot more and because I do the reviews on them, I like it because it lets me kind of do the thing of like, let's see what I have time for, and then I can kind of prioritize, what is necessary for the review. But then when I'm playing on my own, I usually, don't mind in the end. When I was younger and more adamant about it having to be more immersive and harder and all that don't tell me anything, let me find out for myself, I probably would have hated it. But I have mellowed out over time, and I kind of actually do enjoy it.
I'm in the same boat as you are, I suppose. Even more so, like I don't have a ton of patience for that kind of working out what I can and can't do. So I'm perfectly happy with this system. It doesn't hurt my immersion if I know what order to knock things out in. It's fine for me. But I just wanted to call it out because it is a question of immersion to some extent. Like, I know that's a major thing that killed Elder Scrolls for Elder Scrolls fans in Oblivion and Skyrim when they made the whole the enemies level up based on you, versus Morrowind's more mysterious world of you don't know where is safe to go or not without actually going and checking out. I didn't have patience for that even back in the day, truth be told.
No, I get that. I think with Morrowind and Elder Scrolls and those games, it's a little bit different because of how those games are made. Like, I think right now the closest would be Horizon Zero Dawn that I've been playing. In that, you can go basically anywhere, but then like you'll bump into enemies that have a higher level than you, that your, gear might not do enough damage on them at that point. But it is completely possible to win those fights if you know what you're doing. I find that to be really immensely rewarding because if it's an open world game, I do like my first thing that if I play an open world game is I usually completely disregard the plot and I just start going like, what is that place on the map and can I go there?
Right.
So if it turns out that they present me with an open world and then they immediately tell me you can't go there because we've got this plot over here, I find myself losing interest really quickly. So I can get the argument of why there shouldn't be that kind of stuff there. Or that it should at least allow you to, make those mistakes on your own. I don't think it's a question of, it's not a binary thing that this is all because of the, having the levels or the enemies level up with you. I think it's more of a question of how it's presented to the player in the design.
That's a fair point, I think. The nuance to this matter as well. This one goes for a little blunt with just a level there. Although I do think it's a little skewed. This game isn't super easy. I guess I haven't died yet in any encounter. But even when I'm doing quests, which the level seems to be okay for me, it feels like it eats up most of my resources, all of the big encounters. I don't know how much trouble have you had in the actual fights in this game?
I had troubles in a earlier part before it got updated because I ended up in scenarios where I built my two characters who I controlled to be very heavily fighting from afar, and like one of them was a grenadier. And the problem was that the game had a bug in the early builds that if you went indoors or if you were in like bunkers or anything, you couldn't throw anything. It would always tell you that you can't throw that here, or you can't launch a missile here.
Oh, okay.
So there was some kind of a coding error that made it so that there was no space to throw. It would always damage your characters.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that does make things hard.
Yeah, so that made things really hard because I had to just resort to melee combat often. And the game is not very good with the melee combat. So that was interesting for a while. But I think that now that they updated it, I went back and played it just so we could have this conversation. That's been fixed now, and now it feels much more balanced and much more fun.
Yeah, it does feel very knife edgy all the time, but I don't know. It does seem to be well balanced since I do keep pulling through all the encounters. It's kind of a turn-based tactics because it's got like cover mechanics and AoEs and stuff, but it doesn't go as heavy on those as like an XCOM game or one of those. But it's a pretty good amount of like tactical maneuvering involved in this game. It's in my 15 hours, I haven't found the combat to get all that monotonous, especially with the new gears and new abilities that those gears provide that you get throughout.
I would agree with that. I think I was talking to my flatmate who is much more into this type of game. Like he has played all the Fallouts multiple times. He's even modded them to be harder. So he plays them on the hardcore levels.
Right.
And he was complaining that this one was too easy for his tastes because this is arguably a little bit more faster paced.
Yeah, I would say that.
But I would say that based off, because both of us like Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes.
This reminded me a lot closer of Dungeons and Dragons in that sense. And I did like that a bit more. But one thing I must say that I didn't like the fact that both teams act out, at once. So that if you go, it's you and your entire party goes at once, and if they go, it's their party at once. I really wish that it would have been so that everybody has their own attack patterns, and that you would have the kind of same...
The initiative count from Dungeons and Dragons, yeah.
Exactly. I really missed that, and I'm glad that this other game that comes out next week...
Oh, yes.
I'm really glad that has that, because that has been nothing short of amazing.
Right, indeed. We'll probably talk more about that on some other day. But yeah, that's a good point, actually. It does feel... What it does is it makes the combat feel very swingy, the fact that you move in teams, because it'll feel like you are absolutely creaming the enemy on your team, and then it'll feel like everything is collapsing around you when they all get to act and like let loose on you. Not to mention, it kind of makes it so that whoever gets the first move in a combat, it feels like they have the advantage just because they get to put the pressure on before the other team.
Yeah, it does do that. And then also, like, towards the later, bigger fights of the game, it does lead to the point that it feels artificially tough. Because sometimes they will just have like, oh no, the enemy gets to go first because the plot dictates it. I'm not a fan of that. I would rather have it so that if the enemy does go first, it's because I've done something in how I've built my characters for a reason to be either slow or faster.
Now that you mention it, there were a couple of moments where I took a pot shot at an enemy, like before combat had started, and then it smashed immediately into a dialogue scene, because that's how the story was written, that you're supposed to have a dialogue before talking to that character. That was kind of disappointing, definitely, when that happened to me.
Yeah, that is the part that I think feels like it could have been better in terms of... Because all the other parts of the story are really open. You get to have a lot of different reactions. You get to have a lot of stuff that can go wrong. You can go just based off of how you play. It's a shame that some of the combat does not allow that, because in Fallout, if I remember correctly, if you took a pot shot at somebody from afar, that was just it. You just went into combat.
Yep.
And it really did make the story change quite a bit if you suddenly kill the quest giver.
Yes, that was absolutely possible in the original games. Whereas in this one, it's even possible to talk to a person after you've killed them, as I found out. Like, you'll then get the little post-fight cutscene discussion, which, it happens in a lot of games, and I don't mind it in, like, maybe more action-oriented games. I suppose, big fight ends in a cutscene or dialogue or something. But in this one, again, with that Fallout heritage coming on it, it does feel a little lame that something like that happens in here.
Yeah, again, not a deal breaker, but certainly something that could have been a little bit more refined.
Indeed. Speaking of what could be refined, let's move to the presentation. I'm not super thrilled with how this game looks. I think it's we've the games we've reviewed over this podcast so far. I think we've usually always given big marks to the visual look. This one, I think, is a little bland.
It is. I am with you there. It's not. Because it's not bad either. But it kind of just is.
Yeah, and sometimes for important characters, you'll get a cutscene that zooms in, like real up close, like as if you're talking face to face. And the character models don't do the game any big service up close. Particularly the hair looks really weird to me. It looks like everyone has fake hair on. It's yeah, and the areas seem. Sometimes the areas are cool, especially when it's like ruins of a past city. It's fun to like romp around like a buried city, and you're going through buildings buried in the snow. But like the city of Colorado Springs feels a little barren, despite it not being that huge of a city. There's just not a lot of content, and visually, again, it's not the most highest graphical fidelity.
Yeah, I also had a big not a big, that's hyperbole, but I do remember being annoyed at the fact that because none of the characters that are in the game that you can pick from, they don't have personalities. They are all blank sheets.
They're kind of like player avatars.
Right, you can choose from a set amount of characters that are made, but they are mostly just vessels for different kind of skill points. They're quick things of like, this character will play like this. But if you make your own character, which is what I did, you get to kind of modify their look, but in the actual game, like their portraits, for example, don't look anything alike. And that annoyed me a lot because like it would constantly be like, this is not the person or character I pictured in the visual representation.
Yeah, I know what you mean. What I ended up doing is I actually looked up a portrait first, and then I tried to make the character kind of look like that person. I did the same thing. I made my own characters. And even then, like, I didn't get super close with the one guy. One guy I made helmeted, and I found the helmet portrait. So that was like, yay. But the other person, you're right. It was a little tricky to get that right. And yeah, could have been better on that front.
Yeah, my flatmate apparently points out also that this is apparently something that has been an issue since like Neverwinter Nights, so 25 years of gaming, that it's something that has never been fixed, and I think it's just a case of limitations of technology even now.
Probably, yeah. I mean, if I think about it, Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, those had those character portraits. They had like a set amount of portraits to choose from. The thing there was because you couldn't zoom in on your character, it was just that tiny little avatar on the screen in that isometric world. You didn't worry about it too much. Like, it was kind of like, well, I imagine if we got up close, my character would look like this. But now that we have the ability to zoom in and we have higher fidelity models, I guess that is a problem that's coming up now. Yeah.
Yeah, I do wish that they would just allow you to upload your own portrait into the game.
Are you sure that's not doable currently?
Is it not?
The previous one did. Wasteland 2, you could put your own images in that, so I'd hope that Wasteland 3 has that ability as well. It's not like very easy. Like, it's not like there's an option in the game, at least in Wasteland 2. You have to know about, like, find the right folder in the files and, like, move the JPEG there. So it's not like made for like to be easy or like something that's like super built in, but the option was made there.
Right, so it's possible, but it's not the default. I think what I'm hoping is that they would make it more into a default that you could like just at the beginning, choose that, hey, do you want to use a custom portrait? Because they've already added the play with a friend option and like all that, and it would make it more of it would feel more of a this is our adventure.
Yes.
Anything else, yeah.
Much more personalizing in that sense. Well, I guess if we talk about presentation, yeah, visually, it's okay, but not super. The music in this game actually did surprise me, though. They've done some interesting stuff with that.
Yeah, it's okay. I can't say I remember it very well. It didn't have that kind of it's not like Fallout with a very iconic soundtrack, but it is good for what it is.
Yeah, there's this interesting where they have these patriotic American anthems or like classic American songs, usually played in odd and kind of off-putting ways. That the first time it happened in like the first boss fight, I was like, okay, yeah, now I'm in on this. Very interesting.
And there's a couple of cults that they use the music for in a similar way, where it's like when you hear a couple of notes here and there, and it starts going like, oh, I see what this is, and it's a very rewarding moment every time. I wish they would have again done a little bit more with it. I think right now it just ends up being a nice Easter egg.
But it's not terrible. It's fine. Although there's a weird thing. This game has full of these tiny little weird jank, you might call it. And one of the weirdest is that sometimes the music is dependent on where your camera is on the world. Sometimes even where your camera is zoomed in or not. The biggest example was when I walked into the nightclub, where I was like, this is a very quiet nightclub. This is very off-putting, until I realized to zoom in, like roll my mouse wheel to zoom in, and then the kind of 80s synthwave pop started. Like, oh, okay. It's so strange that there isn't like a normally you just have a song playing for the area. It's very odd when that happens in the game.
It is. It feels like that it's something that they probably will update and fix in a patch, because they already have a couple of patches on the way, and I think a big one just came out through the ether a couple of days ago.
Yeah, you're actually right. It was my Steam was downloading it this day. Actually, unfortunately, I did not have time to Google what it did, but yeah, definitely. I hope there is a lot of stuff that could be addressed here. None of it is a huge deal breaker. It's something like you use the left mouse button to move around, but then you use the right mouse button to do... No, sorry, it's the other way around. You use the right mouse button to move your characters, but you use the left button for everything else, and you can't remap mouse buttons unless they just patched it in. It's tiny stuff, which is a little detracting, but again, doesn't ruin the experience once you get used to it.
They are not huge issues, and that's fine. I mean, every game these days will ship with weird glitches here and there that you just kind of expect at this point.
Yeah, you kind of have to live with it, unfortunately. Fortunately or unfortunately, at least it's great that games can be patched in this day and age, so it's not just a from-the-box version anymore. Yeah, I believe we are about done here. So from me, this is a strong recommend, especially as I mentioned, a longtime Fallout fan. This is like that experience back again, and it's really cool.
I would agree. I would recommend this. I'm a little less enthusiastic, but that's just because I'm not that much of a fan of this, and I have seen now other games that are coming out that are better. But in terms of that, if you like Fallout, if you like Wasteland stuff, if you like this kind of irreverent humor, definitely give it a try. I would say that it's much better with a friend than it is played alone. I've played now some of it with my flatmate, and it does feel like more fun that way.
That's good to know. I did not get a chance to try out the co-op, but as a big mark for this genre and this series, I think it can be enjoyed even on your lonesome for people like that. But yeah, we're gonna close it up here. I guess there might be more games of this ilk coming up in the future, as you mentioned, so those might be in the future coming up as topics as well, don't you think?
Yeah. I guess I'm allowed to say that in the next coming weeks, there will be a lot of talk about a certain game that starts with B and ends with Baldur's Gate.
A certain other big representative of this genre. It's crazy, kind of, I have to say, that isometric RPGs are back the way they are. They were gone for a long while.
Yeah, they had a very, very bad time for the, what was it, like 2008 to 2018 almost?
Yeah, I'd say even earlier, like already like Neverwinter was like 2004, I think, and I think that was kind of the last hurrah. Neverwinter 2, I don't think ever made as big of a splash.
Oh god, it's been that long.
Yeah, and Dragon Age tried to keep it alive in like 2009, but then Dragon Age 2, they immediately fell on, oh, let's just make fantasy Mass Effect. Let's just do that. So
yeah, and as much as I love Dragon Age 2, I'll be the first to admit that it was a major step down from the first Dragon Age.
Exactly, yeah. So it's very cool to see these kinds of games again, and we will probably have to return to them. But can you tell us what else you are working on? What other stuff you've got going on at the moment, Jonathan?
Well, I was just thinking that since the isometric stuff is coming back and we're kind of living through this phase of game companies catering to our nostalgia, I just reviewed and I've been playing a lot of the Tony Hawk Pro Skater remake. And that is like, I compared it to like going to a high school reunion that doesn't suck. It's a warm kind of embrace of nostalgia of like it. Like I started playing it and I immediately had this massive flashback as if I was again sitting in my room in my parents' house and being, what was it, 12 years old when that came out, the first one, and just remembering how at that age how simple everything was and how how much that music of that type meant and all that. And it was the good kind of nostalgia where you can look back on it and go like, this was fun, this was great, it's nice to revisit. I'm glad that it's not this anymore, but it wasn't a painful like, good lord, did I really like this when I was a kid. So it's one of those things that I really was happy to see that is coming back in that kind of way. And with Wasteland, this reminds me of how Fallout used to be. The Baldur's Gate game has been reminding me of how it was like to play Dungeons and Dragons when I was a kid. I mean, we still do play it, but it reminds me of the first moments when you get into it and you start realizing just how much is possible because you're only limited by your imagination.
Yeah, the headspace of the new player.
Yeah. So those are the big ones. I mean, in the coming weeks, I am going to be working on a really big piece on Baldur's Gate, and then an even bigger piece on Cyberpunk 2077. So this has been an RPG-heavy autumn for me.
Okay, man. I don't envy the amount of work that's going to take just to get through all that material. Although I'm sure it's enjoyable.
It is, and there's a lot of stuff that is going to be talked about. I think I'm going to have to do a episode on my own of just talking about the games, because there's a lot of stuff to go through them that will not fit into an article, but it's something that I think that anybody who likes role-playing games of any type are going to have an incredibly good time this year, because those two that are coming out are stellar examples of what you can do with the format.
I certainly look forward to them, and I do look forward to reading/hearing your takes on those.
What have you been doing, though?
Well, it's I've been still happily sticking to my 6 episodes a week schedule on my channel, Minsk and Friends. right now, actually, the games right now are some of the hottest I've played, I feel personally. I'm really thrilled with Tales of Vesperia. I'm thrilled with the games that are coming after Vesperia. And so in a couple of weeks, you'll see a couple more different kinds of RPGs that I'm going to be playing instead of Vesperia once we finish that. And freaking Ace Attorney is just blowing me away all the damn time. It's so impressive with its writing and its pacing and everything. It's super clever. On top of that, I'm playing another Ys game because I really liked Ys 7 back in the day. But now I'm playing the fan favorite Oath in Felghana. It's if you want to see pro playing, you don't want to see my playthrough because it's a very challenging game. But again, I found it very fun to play through this old school hack and slash RPG. That's about all I've got shaking at the moment. We haven't yet gotten into the streaming that we teased last episode, but I think chances are still always open, aren't there?
Oh yeah, they're still coming, but as you can probably hear, both of us are pretty much neck deep in projects right now. I still don't understand how you manage to keep up your pace with the videos, but you somehow do.
It's so funny that it too, since I'm just like, wow, he just keeps on cracking out those articles of his. Impressive.
Well, we are in a mutual admiration society, which is always a good place to be.
I would say so, definitely. All right, well, thank you again, everyone, for listening, and we hope to catch you again another day for whatever next might be our topic of discussion. So, from me and Joonatan, and it's a good night, and see you later.
See you later.